Hello. One of the problems that many people have when they read ancient religious texts is that they find accounts of warfare, battles, peoples being destroyed, armies moving, generals doing this and that. So it leads us to the question, why is the study of such warfare of any relevance today? And so with me is Dr. Carly Crouch, who works on ancient warfare in the Hebrew Bible. Carly, welcome back again. Tell us about warfare in the Hebrew Bible and in the ancient Near East. Tell us something about it.
Well, there is, as you say, a lot of warfare and military violence in the Hebrew Bible. And in some ways, that's not surprising at all. Some people reckon that in the entire history of human existence, there have only been just a few years where somewhere on the planet there hasn't been a battle or war going on. And so in a text which talks about human life and human existence, we would surely expect to have material about warfare and battles. So in the Hebrew Bible, the material we have often talks about the ancient Israelites, or eventually in their division between two kingdoms in Israel and Judah, and their battles against various foreign enemies. Some of the more famous narratives talk about the invasion of Israel into the land of Canaan and their destruction of the Canaanites.
And of course, there is also the geopolitical reality that the land that produces the Hebrew Bible is, as it were, at the junction between Mesopotamian civilizations to the east, who are always going to try and expand towards the Mediterranean, and Egyptian civilization, which is expanding northwards. And we know that the land is at various times occupied by the two different forces. Tell me, is there an ethics of warfare within this, or is it just simply an account? Is it just accounts of battles?
There is an ethics of warfare in it. In the Hebrew Bible, it's actually quite remarkable when you start to look at why it is that the Israelites go out to battle, and you try and understand what justification there is for destroying the enemy. There are two different kinds of things which come to the fore, and they're actually both two parts of the same issue. And that's that the justification for warfare in Israel and Judah, like much of the ancient Near East, is a matter of defending the Israelites and their culture from threats perceived to potentially be able to destroy it. It's really very similar to the language and the rhetoric which we have about warfare in the present day, that we must destroy our enemy because they are a threat to our way of life. So some things haven't changed in 2.5 millennia.
Could you give me an example of a warfare scene that has some sort of religious or theological significance? Because I know that many people who read this, who read these accounts of battles, they find this the most off-putting part.
One of the narratives in which warfare has a religious significance, although it's difficult to pick actually only one, because
well then pick several.
Warfare in the ancient Near East is fundamentally a religious activity. And important to understanding warfare in the ancient Near East is that doing battle against your enemy to try and destroy the enemy which threatens you, the human army, which is going out to battle against their enemy, is seen as the earthly counterpart of the god, who is going out to battle against the forces of chaos in the universe. And so the human army, and led by its king, are going out, just like the god, to destroy the forces of chaos, that is, their human enemies, in order to make the present territory and space safe and an ordered place for human existence.
That, of course, raises a major problem, because there are many people in the world today who look back to these texts as sacred texts, and yet they present an image of God which I'm sure these people would not want to affirm. Does the issue of warfare in these texts actually show how irrelevant they are to contemporary religious understanding today?
I don't think it shows how irrelevant they are, but I think it does show the importance of understanding what these texts are trying to do in their own context and how they're conditioned by their own context. And one of the things that actually they can help people in the present do is understand the effect that our own present context has on our own assumptions about why we go to war, for example. Do we go to war to defend freedom and justice and liberty? And why do we think that those are justifiable goals for going to war?
So, in other words, don't think that we're any better, but use the ancient texts to remind us to critique our own activities.
Mm-hmm.
Many years ago, I had read the account of the destruction of the Egyptian army in the Red Sea. The great scene that that filmmakers have, the walls of water to the left and right, and he's Charlton Heston standing at the other end. And I read this with a class, and someone put up their hand and said, "This is awful. What about all the people who were destroyed?" The text is clearly, the book of Exodus is clearly rejoicing. The horses, all the chariots, all the soldiers, they're all being destroyed. And there's a clear song of joy at the end of it, the song of Moses, that God has just wiped out. How do you react to that story?
I suppose I react to that story as almost a perfect example of what we're talking about, that the conduct of war is seen as a means to protect one's own existence. And the exodus from Egypt and the flight from the Egyptians is almost par excellence. It's the origins of Israel as a people and as a nation. And the Egyptians are the ultimate threat at this very beginning stage. They have the power to completely destroy Israel. And so that's the kind of thinking which is going on in this text, which we may not agree with, but that's the kind of thinking which justifies within this text the destruction of the Egyptians.
And if someone took an act of destruction today and said, "Oh well, we can see this as the hand of God," what does one say?
One says that they are certainly in a long line of people who've done just that. A number of imperial powers, the British Empire, the Spanish Empire, the American Empire, if you wish to call it that, in the early days, that the destruction and defeat of enemies has often been seen as mandated by God. And I think that's part of the reason that studying the ancient text in a critical fashion is very important for the present day, so that we can understand why and how the ancient military activities were occurring and use that to critically assess why and whether such activities might occur today.
Carly, thank you very much.